an advocate for cryptocurrency, musician, extremely talented musician, is in the cryptocurrency space, and I believe you were a speaker at the last Bitcoin conference, correct?
I speak at a lot of different conferences. I actually didn't speak at the Bitcoin Magazine one. But I just got back from, I don't know where was the last place I spoke. I think the Libertarian National Convention. I also spoke in Portugal. I don't know. I have a hard time keeping track of all the places that I'm speaking, but about once a month or so, I'll go to different conferences around the world and I'll talk about either Bitcoin or TatianaCoin, my experiences as a musician, or sometimes I'll just perform for people. But yeah, I got actually into Bitcoin in 2012. So I've been here for a long time. I got my first Bitcoins at $11. So I wish I was richer when I bought them. Nobody believed me. I was like asking all my rich friends, "Hey, you got to get into this," and they're like, "Oh, that's a scam." But I did put some money into that, so that was my first foray into it.
That's how we all get started. Michael Saylor, myself, everybody, Donald Trump, we were all skeptics at first. So I want to talk on that. When you first got into cryptocurrency, explain that story. How did that happen? What sparked your interest in Bitcoin, especially
Sure.
at that early of the time?
Sure. So I'm a singer songwriter, and I've always really been influenced by the singer songwriters from the 60s and 70s. I had heard for a while about, just like I had kind of developed the idea that music was a way to convey an idea. I often cite Cat Stevens and his song Peace Train because I remember just listening to that and thinking, wow, you could actually promote change with that. I had gone to Berklee College of Music in Boston, so I was doing regular music stuff and I started working at recording studios, managing them on the business side because I wanted free studio time, right? That was the bottom line. And so
Fair.
in 2011, I found out about the Federal Reserve. I watched the movie Fiat Empire, America Freedom to Fascism. I saw the Money Masters, and then I realized who was my arch enemy. Up until that point, I had been, I guess, a little bit more on the left in terms of what I thought would be the proper activism. But then once I gained an understanding of Austrian economics and just how the financial system worked, I realized, okay, these guys are my enemies. And when I saw what happened with the 2012 elections, people talk about fake news now, but I mean, the media was totally captured in 2012. And I saw the Republican Party actually break their own rules in order to put in their own candidate instead of,
Yep.
following the rules. So I became very disillusioned with the political process in terms of solutions. And luckily, Tony Galippi and Stephen Pear from BitPay, they actually had sponsored my performance down in Tampa. And they came to visit me at the recording studio in New York. And I remember talking to them for about 3 hours, and they were just telling me all about it. And frankly, I thought it was boring. I don't care about finance. I don't care about any of that stuff. Tech is just not in my wheelhouse at all. So I did want to try it out though. I guess maybe I'm not that risk averse. I gave it a shot, and I had just a little bit of money saved up. I mean, a couple $100, and I bought my first Bitcoins at $11. Unfortunately, I sold them. I didn't hold them onto them. I was
It's
kind of
okay.
living
You're not
off.
the only one. You're not the only one
Yeah.
that did that.
Yeah, well, I was living off of Bitcoin after that point because, once it started going up, it was a total game changer for me. Musicians, we make no money. It's like a joke. And so I started to see the possibilities of Bitcoin, especially by having deeper conversations with people and realizing just the impact that it could have on the world. I had never known that there was even a challenge to get banking services. And who would want banking services anyway? I always want to get rid of Chase or whatever, Bank of America. I'm like, forget these guys.
And it's
So
getting harder and harder, by the way. It's getting super hard nowadays, especially if you go abroad as an American, as you know.
yeah. So basically, I bought my first Bitcoins and I learned about it. And then I figured, well, listen, if I, as a person who hates the Federal Reserve, can't get excited about Bitcoin, I figured we needed to kind of bring in the big guns. So as a musician, I figured, well, musicians are great at conveying ideas with their music. That was what I had done for the Ron Paul movement, making a lot of anti-war music and stuff. And basically, I made the Bitcoin jingle to sort of lure people in and get them excited about it. And that was really my first kind of big splash on the Bitcoin scene. There wasn't a ton of Bitcoin music back then. So, and the jingles, it was quite catchy. So I debuted that in 2013. And so that was kind of my first real experience with Bitcoin that led me to creating TatianaCoin, which I did in 2014.
Hello, where can we get Tatiana Coin? If somebody wanted to buy it, for example, I'm actually a fan of yours, so since 2019. So I'd like to get some. Never really asked you that, but my first time.
Yeah, so you can buy TatianaCoin by using a dispenser. So I actually only started selling them again. This is the 10-year anniversary. So actually, let me give you a little background about why I made it, and then I can tell people like where the
That's fine.
project stands now.
Go ahead.
So basically in 2014, I had been talking a lot with Adam B. Levine from Let's Talk Bitcoin. You may be familiar with that podcast. He also went on to create the CoinDesk podcasting network, and now he has an AI company, and we do art stuff with AI. But back then, Adam and I were talking about, how could we solve the problems for artists? And the two main problems that I saw were fans and funding. How do I make sure that I don't have to have a waitressing job? And how do I make sure that I'm not playing to the bartender and the waitress, right? Like it's
Yeah.
very hard to kind of keep those relationships. I had built up large fan bases on Friendster, then MySpace, then Facebook, then YouTube. But what I realized by the time that I got to Facebook, about halfway through that experience, was that Facebook actually owned those relationships. I was building up an audience for Facebook to monetize. But when I wanted to reach them, I wasn't able to. And it infuriated me. I felt like they
So
were
Ken, I want to ask a question. Based on that, so you just said something that's really important that I've heard a lot too. That you said Facebook owns those relationships. My understanding is a lot of artists have that problem as well. That the record deals they sign, the songs are owned by the studio, not by the artist. Is that true?
Oh yeah, a lot of times. I mean, that's generally the deal. The record label is making the investment for the artist, right? So they have to get their costs covered back when the artist is recording. So if they, spend $100,000 on the recording costs, before the artist gets paid, they kind of have to pay that back. Depending on the deal, there's like a little bit of wiggle room there, but and then it also depends if the artist owns their songwriting. So if I write my own song, that's one thing. If I have a publishing company, then they take a portion of it. And sometimes you have to make a deal where you're negotiating with a lot of different rights and royalties. But the reality is that the average artist isn't going to make any money right now, right? It's not like we have CD sales where people are
Oh
making
yeah.
something decent. One of the notorious actors in the music industry right now is Spotify, right? So you can have 1 million plays on Spotify and you get $1,000. Well, the ROI that you spend on that is insane because you're going to spend a lot more than 10 hours or something promoting yourself to get 1 million plays, right? And the cost of recording a song, for me anyway, right now is probably around 2 grand per song, something like that.
That's
So
pricey.
yeah, I mean, I get really good people, and to be honest, it's actually pretty cheap compared to what you do. Because if you use real instruments, that's where they get you, right? And I want to use real
Yeah.
instruments because I don't care about electronic ones. So to be honest, if I wasn't getting like the friend rates and stuff, it would probably be closer to 4 or 5. My engineers also has Grammys and stuff, and he's really talented. But that is what it is. If you go into a recording studio, you can easily run up a tab of 100 grand to record an album easily. um
Okay.
so
That's fine. Go ahead. So
but
Diana, go back to connect it to Facebook. What you just said about Facebook, by the way, that you didn't own anything, right? So I want to like, how can you compare that to the way that we just said, like the artists don't own a lot of their music, the studio puts up the investment, kind of like Facebook owned a lot of the audience that you had. How can blockchain help with that? Can you just further explain that? Like, I guess I know you were going on that track, but just so you know, I wanted to contrast it so we can bring it back to like your personal experience as well.
Right. So when I made Tatiana Coin, the point of it was to solve those problems, right? So people could buy Tatiana Coin. So now they're supporting me. They're getting something that gives them access to exclusive music, that's giving them kind of like a Patreon type experience.
Oh,
And
cool.
and since there's a limited amount of tokens, supply and demand, if I become more famous, then their tokens will become more in demand. And then the other part of it was that it was an unbreakable bond, right? Unless of course they part with the token. One of the holy grails in the music industry is having somebody's email address because your email address follows you around everywhere.
That's
But
true.
people don't necessarily use Friendster anymore, right? They're not on MySpace. So I made those relationships for nothing. And now with Facebook, if I want to reach my own fans, I have to pay them every single time. So how does that work, right? So if I have an artist coin connecting me directly to my fans, I could skip all the middlemen, and then I can send them out information about what's going on, maybe a latest album. If they want to hear a song demo that I'm trying to work through, give me some feedback. There's all different kinds of ways that you could do the utility part, and it's really up to the artist. In my case, I was the first artist ever doing it, And not having the technical experience, I really didn't take into account that it was like having a car without any roads. So we raised about $30,000, which was enough for the record. Um, and then, and I even paid my musicians with Bitcoin. That was fun. And a lot of them sold immediately, except for my main engineer and producer. And now I told him, when Bitcoin goes up to $1 million, I get a free record. So I'm waiting. I'm
I
waiting
hope he
for
said
that to
yes to that,
happen.
right? It's a pretty good deal, so hopefully he said yes to that.
He did, and he also did really well with the Bitcoin that I paid him, right? So he's happy, and we're good buddies. But anyway, so I made TatianaCoin, and then I realized it was like a car with no roads. There weren't tools to actually use. So Adam and I, we worked together on a company that he founded called Tokenly. And Tokenly was, as far as I can tell, the first Web3 company out there. We didn't even call it blockchain, we called it Bitcoin 2.0. And it wasn't called Web3. Only a couple years ago, I heard, oh, Web3, and I'm like, oh wait, didn't we already invent this? So, they always are coming up with a new name for these kinds of projects. But we made a lot of really early use cases. So I minted 3 million Tatiana coins, and I used Counterparty, the protocol, which was a meta protocol built on top of Bitcoin. A lot of people think the first NFTs and stuff, not that Tatiana coin wasn't exactly an NFT either. It was, if anything, it was a little bit more like a meme coin. But people a lot of times credit that to Ethereum, but actually Counterparty was the first one. And it's funny now when people talk about runes and ordinals saying, oh, this is the first stuff on Bitcoin. It's like, no, it's not. There's a whole bunch of stuff that happened on Bitcoin using Counterparty. So the first tokens that I made were the Tatiana coins. And then in 2015, I minted Tatiana Moroz, just that name. I think I made 100 of those. And then by 2017, we had just cranked out so many different products that nobody was ready for. And one of the things that we were playing around with was doing a tokenized vinyl. So I minted 1,000 of each of my albums up until then. So those are actually NFTs, and they were correlated to the album title and stuff like that. The problem with Tokenly, in a lot of ways, I think we were more advanced than any of the companies out there now. Like, we literally built 20 different products, and we had a token identity management system, we had a marketplace, we had a dispenser, we had a minter, we had just everything that you would really need. Um, but unfortunately, we didn't raise money. Like, we only raised 700K in the very beginning, and then since then it was impossible to raise because we were so early. And it was really frustrating because, you know, we knew that this is the direction that things had to go. And now we've seen that we were right. But being right doesn't mean anything. The VCs,
Yeah.
they didn't want to do it. They were like, "Oh, this is too risky." They couldn't barely understand what we were doing. A lot of times they gave us feedback like, "Oh, well, you need to focus on one single thing." But to me, as an artist, I didn't want to focus on one single thing. I wanted to build something that I owned, i.e., if I don't like the platform, I can leave with my token holders, but where I can have all of the interactions with them. So I can message with them, I can offer them sales, I can offer them different concerts, I can do all sorts of different things all in one place that I could actually build out long term. It's super annoying to have to check 50 different places, where even like with something as simple as messaging, right? You can imagine how much more complicated it gets when your music lives on 100 different places. Also, I think that people overestimate the amount of money that artists are making. Like, artists don't make anything.
Yeah,
So,
that's what I've heard too.
well, I just hear people talking about royalties and getting excited about royalties, and yeah, I guess that helps if you're investing in, like, the Satanist artists that are really popular right now. Sure, like Beyonce's record will probably do well. I'm not saying she's a Satanist, but questionable stuff. Huh. These people are weird. Anyway,
Yeah,
jokes
they
aside,
are.
like, I didn't want to make Tatiana Coin to help Beyonce or Taylor Swift or Rihanna or any of these chicks. Like, that's not why I did it. I did it because I know that if an artist has 1,000 fans and each of them give them $100 a year, then that means you're making 100 grand a year. And now you're in business. Now you can maybe have some health insurance. Maybe you can afford certain things like shoes. I mean, it's insane how much it costs to be an artist, and the ROI is just a total joke. So
So
that's
you
why.
did this more. You did the royalty situation. So you talk about royalties. You did that more so to help like the smaller artists, right? Like to manage, basically help the small artists that aren't selling as much as the top artists to be able to have more money in their pocket per se, or how would you explain it?
What I would say is that I'm not exactly, no, I didn't make a product to compete with royalties, but I'm saying that the idea of using tokens and the blockchain to administer royalties is a little bit naive in that most artists aren't
Okay.
generating royalties at all.
Oh,
And
I understand.
yeah, and so that's the bottom line, is that artists don't have a place to make money. I'll give you another example. My friend, uh, the engineer Grammy guy, right? He does gigs out in LA. And I said to him, "Hey, when you do a gig in LA, how much do they pay you?" And it looks like a really cool gig, hotel cafe or whatever that place is. And in fact, he was making 150 bucks. So you tell me how it's worth it, because he's got to get ready, he's got to get to the gig, he's got to
Yep.
spend 5 hours there. And this guy who's been working for over 20 years plus in the music industry, has a higher education, has thousands and thousands of hours logged in the studio, and he's making $150. What the hell kind of industry is that? It's a joke, right? So
Yeah.
so that's why I think sometimes when people have these ideas, oh, well, you give them a piece of the royalties, they just don't understand that most artists will never even see royalties. There's other instances where you'll also have your music stolen from you or used without you necessarily approving it. I had different songs, like for example, I had my song in Dance Moms and then in something else, and nobody even came to me to ask me if I could be using it, right? And overall, just trying to fix those scenarios and going to ASCAP or BMI and saying, "Hey, what's going on with this?" They've always got some kind of excuse, and it could just be artist nativity, right? From
Yeah.
my perspective, but it's just very, very hard to make any money with this stuff right now. And then it became very popular to kind of place your music into films and commercials and stuff like that. But the reality is that those are also gated areas, right? You have to know somebody who's going to pick you out of the bajillion artists that are begging for a little crumb from the table. So
Yep.
that's why I wanted to do TatianaCoin, but it was definitely ahead of the game, right? And that wasn't really helpful. It's cool to say, "Oh, I made the first artist coin in the world." It's not that cool to be like, you know, not able to necessarily monetize that in some significant way, right? And more importantly, that there's no real way to actually use the tokens, because so I made tokens for all my albums up until Keep the Faith. And then my last album, Love Songs for Idiots, I used AI to generate the art. We did some really neat stuff with that right when AI and art were launching, like around the time that Midjourney was coming out. Adam Levine, he created a company called 330 AI. And now
Mhm.
it's been folded into Blockade Games. So they're doing 3D renderings for video games and like movie studios and stuff with AI. But in this case, we were just starting out, and so that was cool to just do something really innovative at the time. And then I was looking around thinking, okay, well, where am I going to mint my new tokens? And honestly, I just didn't find anything that seemed appealing. All of them have their flaws. And the platforms that are being built, a lot of them want to have their own token, and that's specifically what I'm trying to avoid. I want to own my own stuff. I do not want to build up fame for some other platform that in 2 years is just going to sell out, and then all of a sudden I'm screwed,
Yeah.
right? So that's how we kind of ended up with me having this album now that I never made any tokens for, because it just wasn't worth it. Interestingly enough, so Counterparty was developed by Adam Krellenstein and a couple other guys, but Adam was the main guy. And so Adam Krellenstein ended up going to work on Symbiont, which was like a banker coin or something like that. I don't know, something that I didn't care about. Sorry,
Finance. Yeah,
bankers.
finance. The finance. That's what the finance world. I get what you're saying. Yeah,
I
it's not
don't
for
care.
artists.
Like, that's not what I'm here
The
for.
hard numbers people.
Yeah. So for 10 years, there's this great guy named J Dog. He was a dev, and he took it all upon himself and maybe a few other key people to kind of keep Counterparty alive, because Adam Kronstein left to go and work on this other project. But now we have a 10-year anniversary of Counterparty. And so that means it's a 10-year anniversary of Tatiana Coin, right? And on top of it, we're seeing this resurgence of Counterparty now because Adam has made so many improvements to the protocol. And so people are getting really excited about that, especially in light of, again, the popularity of ordinals, the popularity of runes, and things like that. It makes more sense in a way for us to be more popular, right? Because we made the original stuff. There's also a huge market, well, not a huge market, that's totally overstated. there's a niche market of historical NFT collectors. They even call themselves archaeologists because they go digging around on the blockchain to find out all the information about everything, which is kind of like a neat subculture in itself. And so
That's
those,
pretty cool. I did not know about that, by the way. It's really interesting. I know that it's such a new market. There's already archaeologists digging up NFTs from like 4 years ago.
yeah. Well,
Uh,
I mean, they're looking at the NFTs from 2014, 2015.
all right.
Yeah, so they're going deep, and not just Ethereum. Like there's some people that like Ethereum. A place if people are interested in that kind of stuff, I would recommend they go to is NFT Relics. My friend Blackstar
All
owns
right.
that, and that's like the main hub where all the NFT historians and collectors and specialized people go. But what makes what's happening now interesting is that not only is Counterparty the protocol having a resurgence and a rebuilding, but all of those old tokens are now considered quite valuable and are considered like historical assets. So, in a way, people buying, investing, not that I would say anybody should invest in anything, and I don't even think they're raising money, but people should support Counterparty because then their older historical assets will be more valued because now it's just cooler, right? People actually know about it.
Yeah.
Most people don't know anything about Counterparty, so now there's all this press kind of coming out about it. But so that's how it ended up. We made Tokenly, and then Adam ended up going to work at CoinDesk, and then I've had a marketing and PR company in the crypto space since 2015 called Crypto Media Hub.
Which is how we met, by the way. One of the events that you hosted, one amazing event in New York City in 2019. But go ahead, continue. Sorry.
Thanks. I really think that I have a knack for it. I mean, my mom liked to throw parties when I was younger, and even when I was at the recording studio, I would force the owners to let me have, these parties and to kind of promote the studio. And I even had some very early music and blockchain events there, in 2015 when everybody was just kind of giving me funny looks, wondering what the heck I was talking about. And now, it's like very, very popular. So basically Tokenly kind of fell by the wayside, sadly. I always think of reviving it, and that may still happen. But in the meantime, I have started to sell some of my Tatiana coins again, just for vintage collectors, and that's been kind of neat to see an interest in that, because the reality is like whatever I use from that, I'd like to use to record another album. um the bear market was really rough for me. So
It was
you
rough
know
for all of us. It was rough for me too. It was rough for everybody. It was a long one too, but it's over
Yeah, it
now.
was long, it was brutal, and it really
Cold.
killed business. It makes it, and also, sometimes I feel like I'm a bitter grump, but the reality is like if you've been in this space for a long time, you've seen everybody talk about, I'm gonna save the world, I'm gonna change the music industry, I'm gonna do this,
Mhm.
me. And none of these people are able to achieve it because it's a lot harder than people expect. And I don't think that people take the time to look at who's come before them and to learn about what mistakes were made. That's, I think, one of the advantages that Adam and I have whenever we, iterate on different token ideas and stuff, is that we've just seen everything and under the sun along the way, and you learn a lot by being aware of those previous mistakes that people are making. um, so yeah, now it's kind of a fun time. I'm curious to see what'll happen with the Counterparty team. They just made a new wallet, but I'm using JDog's free wallet, and I just started doing some coins on Dispenser so that people could buy them and just keep them for themselves. But there's some challenges with dispensers, and the wallet can be a little bit wonky sometimes. So it's definitely not an ideal situation, but I am excited about where things are building out, and I'm happy that people are taking an interest in my previous token stuff. So that's pretty neat. And yeah, so I haven't seen that many music products that I'm excited about, unfortunately. Like there was one company that I thought was doing a good job called Single in Nashville, but they use Solana, and I'm just not excited about Solana. I
We
know
don't want
people
Solana,
are.
really? I love Solana. I thought it was, it's faster, more. I mean, no, we're not talking about blockchain, but it seems like it's a faster, more efficient uh, product versus Ethereum.
I mean, I think that there's some benefits to look. Ethereum's got a huge audience, right? They have a lot of products built out because they've been funding that kind of stuff. Like the ecosystem is really developed. But
And
then
first mover
also,
advantage as well.
Yeah, but I'm just not that excited. I don't know. Maybe I'm old school. Maybe I'm just being like an old fuddy duddy or something. But I just like my Bitcoin based stuff, and I know
That's
that Bitcoin
fair.
is going to be around in 5 years. I'm not so sure about Solana. I'm not so
No, that's
sure.
definitely fair because yeah, the ordinals and everything that's building these second layers that are being built, like the Lightning Network and everything, is really exciting on Bitcoin. But just on that note, though, like NFTs, we talk a lot about NFTs. In a perfect world, how do you see like an artist? Let's say I want to record an album and I wanted to interact with my fans directly. Do you see NFTs specifically really taking a big role on that since you're pioneering that space and you've done it before on your own? I think that's the best way for an artist to actually utilize blockchain is through NFTs.
Okay, so the cheesy artist that doesn't care about reality would tell you, "Oh yeah, make NFTs. It's gonna be so great. You're gonna be rich." That is a lie. A lie. The problem is that
Okay.
people don't want them. They don't want them. Only weirdos want them. I'll give you an example. I have a girl that I know who has about 150,000 um 150,000 fans like across all of her socials, right? And she got into the ordinal stuff. And of all of her fans, how many do you think wanted the NFTs and made the transition into that space?
Like 10 people? Probably a really small amount because not many people
What?
into it. How
What?
many, again, how many fans was it? How many fans? I don't know.
150,000 people, and only one wanted to do it. My other
That's not even
friend,
1%.
I mean, it's pathetic, right? So my other friend
All right.
worked at a very successful, very well funded company. They did huge NFT launches. What was his takeaway after it? Nobody wants them. The audiences are not ready for it yet, which is what really, really sucks. However, the same girl who had the 150,000 fans, she now has these like super, like, kind of like techie kind of
Yeah.
fans. And a couple of them gave her $30,000 for an NFT.
So she made
So,
her money back. She made her money back, her initial investment at least.
but they don't care about her music. They don't even like her music. They
They
only
just covered the
like her
NFTs.
They only like her because she's early in that game and they're speculating and they think it's cool what she's doing. So,
Okay.
like, I really took a lot out of that conversation that I had with her because it kind of gave me some perspective. And her approach was also very personalized. So she really took the time to build up those relationships with these new fans. And I think that that's where the opportunity lies, is to create new fans that are possibly able to give you more than the average fan can give you. My average fan doesn't generate me any money. They can listen to me 100 times on Spotify a day and it generates like $3 at the end of the year, right? So that's not helpful. If I build, okay, let's say I print t-shirts. Okay, print some t-shirts. It costs me $10. I sell them for $20. Okay, first of all, what am I doing with all the t-shirts when they're not being shipped? Like they're just gonna take up room in my apartment, like which is a gajillion dollars, like to
You gotta
keep
store it
them.
somewhere, yeah.
Right. And then every time I go out and mail it, it takes me, let's say, 30 minutes to pack it up, walk to the mailbox store, blah, blah. So you're saying to me that the $5 profit is worth it for me? Like I'm making $10 off of the profit total for all of that work plus storing it in my house. Like that's not such a great plan. The same musician that I was talking to earlier, the one with the $150 a gig, I said to him, "Oh, wow, you're going on tour. That looks so cool. You guys must be having a fun time. It looks like they look like rock stars." He says that they barely break even. So when people say, "Oh, artists make money on tour," no, they don't. If you're like Brad Paisley, you make money on tour. If you're, some little random chick from Tennessee, you're not making money on tour. In fact, if you want to go on tour with Brad Paisley, you've got to pay anywhere from 100,000 to $250,000 to be on his tour.
Just to be on a tour, just to get your name out there. That's before you even like can actually have your own tour and actually make some money.
Yeah,
That's pretty
and who the
crazy.
hell has that money? Nobody. And so then you get stuck with the stupid record labels, and then they're telling you what to do. One of the things that we made a point with TatianaCoin, I really wanted to kind of drive home the censorship aspect. And I had become very involved with the Free Ross movement. I became friends with Ross Ulbricht. I'm very good friends with his mother. She's here right now, and
Oh, really?
yeah, she's in the
I want to
other.
say thank you for everything. I want to say thank you for everything she's doing, and I should totally support the movement.
She's a rock star, absolutely. And so anyway, I became really good friends with Ross, and I wrote a Silk Road song. And for my birthday, Ross had taken a picture that someone had taken of me, and he made a hand drawing of me, holding a guitar, looking cool. And so I decided to use that as my album cover, because what I wanted to underline was the fact that if I, as an artist, don't have freedom of expression, let's say I was signed to a record label, let's say they don't like Ross Ulbricht, let's say they think Chuck Schumer is the smartest guy and they hate Ross. So all of a sudden now I am not able to express myself fully as an artist because I'm beholden to my overlords, which is the opposite of what I want art to be, right?
Yeah, it's hard. It seems like about freedom about expressing yourself, not just doing what somebody else is telling you to do.
Yes, and so that's why I use that as an album cover, and I still have that hand drawing. I've got to put a frame on it and put it in the house somewhere. But basically the point is that um these are things that artists have to face, and I needed to find solutions. Like, I've been very political the whole entire time. The only kind of politics is the politics of like a really hardcore leftist, right? That's approved of in the music industry. But
Yeah.
if you're a libertarian or right wing, oh no way, you're dead in the water. So I didn't want to see other artists being kind of stifled going along. And so that's why I wanted to show, when people look at that album cover, they say, "Oh, who's that?" I'll say, "Oh, this is my friend Ross. He's in jail for double life plus 40 years. Will you sign the petition so we can get him a pardon?" Right. And so I can do my activism. I could tell the story of why it's needed. And I feel good about what I'm doing in terms of my contribution to freeing him and also raising awareness for all of the other poor slobs that are in the prisons, right? I met somebody over the weekend who was one of the January 6th people, and I did an interview with him for We Are Change. And he basically told me about how he was in jail for 34 months, how he had scurvy, how his hair was falling out, how his teeth were basically loosening in his mouth, how he had no nutrition, how he got beaten up by
Horrible.
different guards. And they were picking on them because they were J6 people. Fine, people don't like January 6th, but this is America, not a gulag, okay?
Yeah,
So
it's true.
so they shouldn't be malnourishing them to the point where their teeth are falling out and like they're losing their hair. And yet they were doing that. And that's very, very frightening stuff. So I think that we need some kind of ability to push back on the system. And one of the things that I love about Lynn's advocacy is that a lot of the people in prison, nobody cares about them. They're just the bad
That's
guys that
true.
belong in
And so,
jail,
yeah,
and they're not nearly as articulate as she is. So basically, you need somebody who can speak up for all of these people. There's a lot of crazy sentencing going on. There's people serving life in Colorado, the weed state, and they went to jail for weed. And everybody else around
really,
is like smoking weed outside this jail. Like, how is that even possible that they're going to be there forever? And in my view, it's a modern day slavery, right? They say,
it
"Oh,
is. It
it's
is.
bad."
Prisons are for free labor for the government and state governments. Free labor completely.
Absolutely. Plus their little buddies make money off of it. Plus the judges are in on the courts. I'm sorry, are in on the profits from those prisons. I mean, there's countless cases like that which seem unpunished for some crazy reason.
Even family court, by the way, but that's a different story for a different day. But even family court, everything smoking weed, like minor, somebody stole a pack of gum. Like people should be going to prison for 5 years for those stuff like that. In my opinion.
Yeah, well, family court is an absolute disaster, and it's created you know, we have so many societal problems. I'm not so sure that the easy accessibility to divorce has been such a boon for us as humanity. I'm not saying people should stay together under all circumstances, but it's definitely like the deterioration of the family has absolutely had an impact on what we're dealing with now, right? People are kind of wandering around without a sense of self, without a sense of what's right and wrong and right, and you see that every single day. You look out into the street, it's basically debauchery everywhere. And then on top of that, you've got Instagram and all the people like racing to the bottom with like the sluttiest picture that they can come up with.
OnlyFans as well and all that stuff. It's horrible, but
Well,
decided
oddly,
to
you
go in
know
a better
what?
direction.
OnlyFans is weirdly a little bit like TatianaCoin because it's for my fans,
You're gonna
right?
have to, explain that though. That's yeah, but you're a classy girl. You're not one of those. So let's just be very clear about that.
Yeah, I hear you. Of course. I mean, I want to clarify that
Yeah.
I'm not advocating for that, but in a way, it is an interesting concept in that people are making direct relationships with their fans. So I was recently encouraged to check out a few talks by the guy from Patreon. He's been trying to solve some of those problems, and he ran into some problems with what he built. So, there's people that are aware of the problem, but we haven't really come up with solutions. So, if people want to buy my Tatiana coins, I encourage them, and I have to start selling them on my website if I could figure out how to do it. um, but, it's still not totally there yet. And I think that the entire industry itself is just very undeveloped in that regard, and not even just on the industry side, but more importantly on the fan side. I don't think that the fans want that stuff yet. I think that the use cases around NFTs and gaming are, I think, a lot more lucrative, and they're a lot easier to make sense. Like, look, if you've got a sword from your game and you want to trade it for, somebody else has like a, I don't know, like a shield or something, like that makes sense because they're already using these little digital items, right? Now you're just making it
Yeah,
so they have ownership of them. Whereas there's nothing really akin to that in the music industry. And I also sort of
not
resent,
yet, not yet, but it'll get there. Don't worry.
I agree it'll get there. So, I guess it's just a matter of time until people are going to be ready for that. Um, but it's definitely not there yet, and eventually I think that we'll even see things where you have artist coins that are trading against one another, but we're also not there yet. Like, sometimes people will say, oh, what exchanges are you on? And I'm like, it's not that kind of thing. It's not about that. There's nothing I could, what is it, Tatiana coin versus Ethereum? That doesn't even make any sense, right? It has to be Tatiana coin versus Taylor Swift coin versus Beyonce coin versus, random artist coin. And once you have that huge volume, then I think that you've got some opportunities.
Well,
um
we already have it with the politics, right? We have the Donald Trump coin, the Joe Biden coins, the Kamala Harris coins. So next is basically what you're doing. Like you said, gaming. You know Grand Theft Auto, right? The game.
mhm. Yep.
The next one is actually, I'm sure you know, is coming out with Bitcoin purchases. Like in game, you can buy guns and weed and anything you want inside the game with Bitcoin, Ethereum, etc.
Wow, I didn't know that.
So your reality is going to come up with the music, the music industry. That's right after, in my
Mhm.
opinion.
Wow. Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting to see how things are going to unfold. I also think that we have a lot of global issues that may impede everything. I know a lot of people think, oh, the bull market's coming, but I didn't really see Bitcoin perform very well during COVID. And, for me, it's supposed to be a hedge against inflation, and I'm not really sure that it's fully functioned in that regard. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see another big dip, which would be unfortunate, but it's a good excuse to scoop up some more coin, right?
But they
Um,
say it's a teenager, right? Bitcoin's a teenager. When we were teenagers, we acted irrational. We had our days that we didn't understand our self identity. We didn't know who we were. We got
mhm.
depressed. Sometimes we were super happy. The next day we are super sad. I think that was just going through like, in my personal opinion, teenager growing pains until it reaches its maturity. In 5 or 6 years, who knows what it'll, hopefully it'll be a full fledged adult, and we won't see these huge dips, and the volatility will decrease. I'm not sure
Yeah.
if you feel the same way.
Yeah, and also hopefully we'll have other products developed. Like, a lot of people love to say shit coins. Oh, they like to say that. And I understand because there are some bad projects out there. But
You mean
I
Bitcoin
also,
versus shit coins, like Bitcoin and then all coins are shit coins? Is that what you mean?
yeah, and I just think that that's unfair because I think that we need experimentation. And if everything out the gate is a shitcoin, that's not true. There's different projects that are trying stuff. You have to break things while you're making things because you're not going to be able to kind of go over that. So I love Bitcoin. Bitcoin's my number one. It's my boyfriend. But, like, I think that those other projects do potentially have the ability to teach us stuff and potentially offer value to humanity. But right now there's a lot of greed that kind of influences that, and then also the lack of clarity in terms of regulation makes it really difficult for people to innovate anyway. So it's we're not there yet, but as far as me, I'm doing my part to kind of get the word out and get people interested in this stuff, in the bear and in the bull markets. Right, I'm not a fair
Well, you
weather.
build in the bear markets, right? So you enjoying your fruit in the bull markets. So we'll get there. Don't worry. We're working on
Yeah,
it. I work in politics too, and we're doing our best to give you guys a good, very clear framework in the political sphere, so you guys can, do whatever you need to do to make this all a reality, right?
yeah, that's definitely my goal. One of the organizations I really like is Perry Ann Boring's Chamber of Digital Commerce, right? So she's got I think it's called the Digital Chamber now, and so they do a lot of work out in DC trying to kind of get some regulation around that. But it's definitely a slog. I wrote my most recent song called Never Give Up. I wrote it for the having. It's not just for the having, but I wrote it, talking to
Oh,
talking.
briefly before you continue, explain what the having is. Some people that are watching this not sure what you're talking about right now, but what is the having? Just briefly before you continue.
Oh, it's basically when Bitcoin, every 4 years they start distributing less rewards to miners. So what was it, like 6.25 before? I don't even remember where the halving ended up. But basically they cut the amount of coins that they're distributing, and then that's called the halving. So a lot of people
Okay.
think that's an interesting time to pick up some coin, and maybe like you see some semi predictable price swings. So people are kind of interested in that. But for me, I wrote the song because I wanted to give people hope. And also, I'm not going to lie, I had to call out Elizabeth Warren because in the bridge, you can hear, we all want to be the big chief of yeah, we all want to be the big chief
You
of
went there.
Lizzie the Cherokee loving Sam Bankman Fried. Can't you see them lying? And that's the reality, right? Like, you've got to also kind of have a skeptical eye with the government involvement. So when we ask for regulation, that has to be done with a skillful hand. I'm not super into helping the government with Bitcoin. Like, I don't want to help those guys. But I admire what Harry Ann and her team are doing, because somebody has to get in there and set the terms, because otherwise they're just going to run roughshod over the industry, period. So it takes all of our efforts, and I have a great admiration and love for the people who have been here through thick and thin. And so if people are interested in that song, they can check it out. It's called Never Give Up. And that's what I encourage people, right? I mean, you can't make investments outside your means. People shouldn't be aping in on weird meme coins and buying Bitcoin when they can't afford it and stuff. That's
I'll
not
make a note of that. Meme coins. Do not ape into meme coins. We all. Some of us are into that kind of thing.
I mean, look, if people have the tech
but,
tips, I want to know how to do it, but I just have never been successful. So,
Man, I'm not gonna. So we can't tell anybody because then people start downloading phantom wallets and then like aping in. Oh, I love melatoning because World and Tatiana told me to go buy meme coins. We're not telling you anybody. We're not giving any financial advice. We're just
yeah,
saying I like meme coins personally.
good. You could tell me which ones to buy, because I like 100x. That's attractive.
I'm not doing that.
Yeah,
By the
and
way,
it's for the best. I
yeah,
don't think I have the best luck with that kind of stuff. But I've kept the hope alive in myself, and also now I think that we're on the brink of potentially so many bad things, right? I'm actually organizing. I don't know if you can make it, but in October, October 18th to the 20th, I'm throwing an event here in Miami, down in Miami Beach, called the Counterparty. Now, it's a little bit of a hat tip to Counterparty the protocol, but actually it's the counter to the political parties, right? Everybody's like, oh, I want to be a Republican, I want to be a Democrat, I want to be a libertarian. Well, guess what? The president ain't coming. He's not your daddy. Okay. And everybody just goes back to sleep every year right after the voting times. And then they just say, okay, I've done my part. My political activism is done. But in reality, we need a lot more than just that. We need to be building out communities. We need to be thinking locally. We need to do permaculture. We need to learn how to homeschool our kids if we need to. I mean, these schools right now are total like brainwashing centers to create idiots. And then also just security, right? How do you build a mesh network? What if shit hits the fan? What are we going to do about it? We need to have some skills that are really workable. So when I tell people about the Counterparty, I tell them, hey, this is an event where we're looking for peaceful solutions outside of voting, right? So everything that makes you a better person, that makes them for a more free world. But unless you're basically ragging on voting or offering something really significantly different, that's not what this is about. We don't care about voting. We care about all the other things that make up a free world. And I think that it's cool to be developing that. And even we're also talking about like the softer side of things. I created a podcast in Bitcoin a long time, a few years ago, called Proof of Love, and I stopped it during COVID. I oftentimes think of bringing it back, but basically,
you have to bring it back because I was actually getting into it and then you stopped. Just saying,
oh, that's
FYI.
a shame.
But
I love doing Proof of Love. It's such a fun show. And but the reason why I made it was because, I'm the musician, right? And so I don't really care that much about the tech and the finance stuff. But what I saw was a lot of entrepreneurs that were burning out, right? Their wife's going to leave them. Their husband's not interested in them anymore. Their kids are like, where the hell's daddy? Because they're just so laser focused on that one aspect of their lives, which is crushing it and dominating in business. But you need to have a balanced, like, palette of everything in your life in order to be successful with longevity. So that's why I invited 8 Evolve, which is a like an app where they have practitioners. So they have hypnosis or Reiki or I don't know, all sorts of weird, like kind of woo woo stuff, right? Because there are things that are unseen. And so I'm trying to give people a little bit of a balance and so they could learn about some of those esoteric things and then they could learn those hard skills, and I mean the mesh network thing is really appealing to me because I don't
But
want
what
to
I need to, but I
I
do
don't know
need
what
to
to
have
do when
a
the grid
link to
goes
that.
down.
But I
Huh?
have to have a link to your. I need to have a link to your Proof of Love podcast because you're gonna bring it back. I need to have a link to that. Also, the event you're having the 18th to the 20th, correct?
Sure. So
And
it's
also to your website.
Sure, I'll send those over. But for people who are watching now, it's TatianaMoroz.com, then Proof of Love Cast. So instead of podcast, Proof of Love Cast. .com, and then I also, and those are evergreen episodes on there. And then thecounterparty.com is the event, and we're actually, I think we're going to get rid of the early bird tickets this week. But there's early bird
What
tickets
day?
right now.
You're gonna get rid of them what day so people know. Today's October 1st, by the way.
I was going to do Wednesday, but I'm not. I'm just behind on things and I want to give people a chance to go. And like we're trying to keep the ticket prices low, right? We're trying to put on the event, but also, make sure that somebody who maybe, got into some trouble in the bear can still find a way to get there. So probably by the end of the week, so maybe Friday. So people should try and do it ASAP.
Fourth or fifth. Anyway, we do have to get going. We have to let you go too, so you can get back to work. So quickly, you already talked about the artists. Do a pitch for fans. Why should fans want to that really like music encourage artists to want to get into the NFT game? Or I know it's a really weird question, but why should they encourage artists that want to get into NFT games, selling their music on the blockchain, create their own tokens like TatianaCoin, etc.?
Well, because number one, artists need to make money, and they need to start experimenting with new things. They may not make money right away, but like being experimental is important as an artist, and also to shape the future of what that's going to look like. But more importantly, I would say that the best thing that an artist can do is get familiar with how our money works. What is money? Why is Bitcoin cooler than, the dollar? And if people have a better understanding about that, then artists can be the voices that communicate that to people, right? The same reason why I did the Bitcoin jingle, because I knew that if I sang about it, people would maybe start tapping their foot. They'd be like, oh, maybe this Bitcoin stuff doesn't suck that bad. If we had a bunch of artists that were awake to what's going on with our financial system, they have the ability to cross, all sorts of lines and get people and bring them into the fold. You can listen to a song in a different language and it can move you to tears. Music is extremely powerful. So if
It
we can
is.
use that power to teach people about how we're being subjugated, then that's what I would really like to see, right? And the more artists that we can wake up to this, because a lot of artists, they're a little bit clueless, and I think that they want to help humanity, but I don't know if they're on the right path. So if we can help show them something else that maybe they can go down that path and think, oh wow, this is cool, and then bring along some normies. I think then we'll have a lot more collective bargaining pressure to at least get our governments under control and the banking system to stop being wild. I don't know if it's salvageable. Frankly, it probably isn't, but we'll
We're
see
gonna
what
do our
happens.
best to try to. We're gonna do our best to try to solve it, but we can at this
Yeah,
moment.
exactly. Or at least create alternative parallel systems. So if everything goes down, we're going to not be like stuck in the streets with nothing. Right. So the sooner that we can be learning about solutions, the better. And so that's, why we're doing the counterparty. People can get their tickets now. And there'll also be a live stream. So if they can't make it down to Miami, which I think is a mistake, they can also watch it on live stream.
And it's never a bad thing to go. Never a bad reason rather to go to not go to Miami. You should always go to Miami whenever you have a chance. So I'm gonna see if I can make it. My schedule is pretty tight with the political situation in DC, but we'll see what happens.
All
Well, with
right.
that being said, I really appreciate you coming to this episode, and we're gonna have you back on again. And hopefully, I'll see you in Miami at some point in the future. If not at your event, we'll be making a trip down there by mid January this next year.
Excellent. I'd love to see you here. And thank you so much for having me on the show. This was really fun.
Yep. And with that being said, upwards and onwards. Thanks for having me.